I had a cousin once. Well, I still have a cousin, but he once said to me at a wedding or something, and he said, "I always imagine you sitting on a hillside leading a revolution." Seems quite a bit of an effort, and also it kind of contradicts the Buddhist principles of wisdom and compassion. It's hard to lead a revolutionary army if you're committed to loving everybody, or at least being wise and compassionate to as many people as possible. Why am I talking about this? AI, the revolution. It's coming, or it's here. I have, from the interest of research and how it affects Buddhist, how it affects the wisdom and compassion of you as a human being, or us as humanity, it does have incredibly far-reaching potential and incredibly far-reaching consequences. The talk at the moment is how much it will affect the middle classes, or the intelligentsia, shall we call them, because it was all very well while we could automate manual labour. But once these issues and technology start to affect the professional classes, you tend to see a very, very large reaction in society. Hence, where most revolutions, when you trace them back to their source, where they originally come from, Russia under communism, started by Lenin and Molotov and other middle class intellectuals. The rise of Nazism. I could go on. You know all this, surely. So, as AI starts to affect us as a society, the implications become greater, and we know not where it will eventually lead. So it's really important, I feel, to keep stressing what it can't do, what it's unable to do at the moment, and seems to be unable to do for a long time to come, is it does lack abilities which are happen to coincide with the things that my own in Buddhist philosophy tends to stress, which is the wisdom and compassion, the empathy, the creativity innate in humans, the connective capacity we have in generating ideas, in generating judgment in wisdom and compassion. And I've tested out the limits on this, my own testing on with the AI programs, and that's what I have seen the limitations. But that does involve us being wary and us having to stress the things it can't do, but also how we tackle the fear that so many people have, or people are starting to have, that the robots are going to take over. Are we going to all end up in the rubble? Or mini John Connors fighting against the rise of the machines? Probably not. In fact, if you want a slightly discursive thing, I'll tell you something that AI is going to produce amongst an awful lot of human beings, and that's boredom. We need a purpose. There's the old saying about everybody needs, the philosophical tenet that we all need someone to love us, and a reason and a purpose to feel needed. And AI, its biggest threat that I can see is that it removes the needed bit. And human beings who aren't needed are absolutely terrible. Terrible for us as a society. The phrase "the devil makes work for idle hands" is ne'er so true. And that is, unfortunately, what I do believe some of the consequences of AI, this generation or these new iterations of AI will do. An awful lot of administrative tasks and backroom work can be automated and will be automated. It will need administrators and overseers, but generalized tasks, those are being automated as we speak. Um, and that creates problems in having an awful lot of humans have. Give you an example. All right. So often the decline of Roman society, or why Rome never achieved technological marvel, or why it never rose to why it didn't have an industrial revolution. And one of the principal reasons behind this is slavery. If you have a limitless number of people to do all your work for you, there is no reason for you to innovate. So why invent a machine that can do something when you can get a load of humans to do it? You can treat them as cattle, chattel, and just get them to do all the hard labour for you, which is how the Roman Empire was founded, or was based upon, especially towards the end, or towards its height. So there's no impetus there. So take that version of AI doing the work of an awful lot of people. It becomes a form of doing all of the drudgery work, which, we have to accept. Most of us in our employment have parts of our work which is drudgy. It's paperwork filling in, it's filling in forms, it's repeating ourselves often. And we can have shortcuts and macros and inputting tricks and tips. But a lot of our work is often repetitious and doing the same thing over and over again. When that is then farmed out and becomes something an AI machine can do, or an AI program or algorithm can do, what do we do with this vast wealth of human beings who are going to be left with nothing to do? Better get those interests and hobbies going, but also you have, where are you going to generate cash from? What is your job going to be if a job is easily automated? Yes, percentage of us can become craftspeople and things that the trades and things that are always going to need customer services, etc. But again, these will suit for a certain amount, but for a managerial class, how's that going to suit them? What are they going to be prepared to do that? So it's one thing that's going to have to be looked at, is how do you give use to an awful lot of people, and it doesn't descend into bread and circuses. Again, back to the right, why they ended up having massive entertainments and giving out free bread, and the games was to keep people entertained, to keep people employed, because slaves were doing all the work and people were bored, and bored and restless people, not a good mix. So that's one thing. I'll save it for another discursive program with myself. But I have ideas on how we can, on things that we could make, or we could put in, that would give people fulfilling lives. And part of that comes back to many years ago. I was talking to a friend's mother, a good friend of mine, and she had spent all her life working in a care home. And she had a young employee who, right from the very start, was very dissatisfied with the job and saw it as quite demeaning. And she had a conversation with my friend's mother, and my friend's mother said, looking after other human beings is the most important job in the world. It's what makes us humans. And there is the old saw about, what's a bird's natural environment, the air, what's a fish's natural environment, water, what's a human's natural environment, you can say land or whatever, but a human's natural environment is other humans. And being integrated, we are, as a social class, we knock bees and ants into a cocked hat. We are the most socialised creatures ever devised in the universe, as far as we're concerned. And it is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness. It is the reason why we have developed so much, and the reason that keeps us halfway between the rising ape and the falling angel. So ways of finding occupation must be based around our care for one another, be that intellectual care, be that entertaining one another, be that providing services face-to-face, coal-face, or remotely, or active participation in politics, in day-to-day decision making. I remember Chomsky talking about the politics is deliberately made dull and uninteresting, and politicians like it that way because it stops people wanting to get engaged and involved in it. In my book, Orwell's 1984, I describe a society or place where humanity has become a self-representative democracy, with the advent of technology and AI, leaving lots of people not or having a lot of time on their hands. Every human is actively encouraged to participate in matters of state, and I describe very exciting ways that can be done. But that is definitely a way, as again the Chomsky was saying, the way that we, the political classes tend to not want active participation, and one of the reasons they give is people just don't understand. People aren't clever enough to understand politics, which he says, quite frankly, is absolute tosh, complete stuff and nonsense. Is you only have to listen to any radio phone-in on football or sport, and people are incredibly knowledgeable and incredibly insightful and are a wealth of information about things that interest them. And so if politics was made interesting, if people felt they had a stake involved in it, then they would be actively encouraged, and they would probably want to be actively more involved in it if they felt they could make a difference. Anyhow, all of this laid out in my novels, available on my website. But anyhow, so there are definitely ways that we can use the AI to our advantage and give people far more leisure time, though there is that saying that there are people who would wish to live forever who can't find anything, who can get bored on a rainy Sunday afternoon. So it is finding or implementing that wealth of interests and things for people to do. Meanwhile, back at the fort, we have the AI in front of us as it stands and as it develops. Now, part of this, or part of our problem, is us, because we have spent the last 20 years now increasingly creating more and more hyper reality. Every time you put a filter onto your Instagram, every time that you edit your video down to it so it's precisely, every time that you project yourself as a much more perfect version of yourself, you are contributing to how we have made the aspirational form of who we want to be an artificial form to who we are. Now, part of that, I am guilty to some extent. I try not to be, but if you look at my earlier videos where I was insisting on not using lights, and now I've got one of these ring things, so at least you're looking at a vaguely presentable, but at least I'm not in deep shadow, looking like Richard Nixon during that live television debate where he looked positively demonic. But I try not to use the filters and cuttings to make myself the best possible version that I am, because I believe that's part of the false narrative, which only aids us aids AI in the way that it can present perfection. And we are not perfect, and we need to appreciate that degree of faults, or that degree of us as being humans, not hyperhumans, not this hyper-realistic constant image. And we could throw blame left, right and centre. You can look at celebrity culture, you can look at Instagram, TikTok, everywhere where people are giving hyper-realised versions of their food that they eat, or how funny and how amazing they are. And we know that all of this is artifice. It's not real. It's real, but it's not really real. And that's when the road we travel with AI, we have to decide the thing that makes us humans is being human, is having faults. It is, as Orson Welles pointed out, we are all saints and sinners. We are all angels and demons. And the point is not to reconcile them. The point is to recognize them. And only in that recognizing of our flaws and our faults, that's what distinguishes us from AI, our ability to see and to acknowledge that we are not perfect, that we are flawed, we are each incredibly human, and that is the increase in wisdom and compassion. One of the definitions of wisdom that I found most is the ability to acknowledge you're wrong, to say, I don't know everything. I know things, but I don't know everything. And the point of compassion is to feel the compassion of those flaws, of to realise that some are harder to show compassion than others, but compassion mustn't be a compassionometer. You can't say, I'm only going to be compassionate to these people over here, but not these people over there. That's the difficult part. But that wisdom and compassion is where AI, that's the fault line between what AI can't do and what we can do, and what makes us through these faults. And the good thing is, to spool it on a bit, acknowledging those faults gives us the creative edge. Because knowing that we're not perfect, and knowing that this hyper reality isn't, we don't live in a perfect system, and our aspiration to be perfect does not happiness bring. But we're good at shortcuts. We're good at internal algorithms. And that's all an algorithm is. It's a way of compacting information to give a shortcut. We're good at lash-ups. We're good at bodging. We're good at finding shortcuts to things. Because something has to work for now. It doesn't have to work forever. It has to work for now, for as long as it needs to work. And that's how the human mind works. That's where comedy comes from. That's where our ability to produce creative art is, our ability to connect two very varied things and to find shortcuts between them by matching up the similarities, by putting a shortcut between one topic or one idea and the other. And again, as I've seen for myself, AI is very poor at doing this. So it's still stuck in that version of the uncanny valley. So uncanny valley being whenever you see a robot or an android, regardless of how human, it's a very popular trope in films and TV and media. But whenever you see an android or a robot that is a simulacrum of a human being, there's always something we are able to detect. Something is off. Something's not quite right. It's similar. We tend to be able to do it with people who have quite serious mental health issues, acute mental health issues. That there is a set of some forms, difficult to define, some form of sort of anti-charisma that they give off, that they are troubled, that there is an issue there, that something's not quite right, the focus isn't quite there. I know if you speak to people who work in mental health, or in my own instance, working for Samaritans or working at the front line for homeless agencies and working with disadvantaged people, you can distinguish or you can have a feeling of somebody who has a serious mental health issue. But it's not the same thing, and I'm not grouping them together, for God's sake. That's not me, is it? I'm merely showing that we have an innate capacity to see differentials. But this comes to the fore with simulacrums and robots and androids, etc. We are able to see what we call the uncanny valley. There's something slightly off that we are able to see or able to perceive. Something's not quite right. And there's an intellectual, the cognitive version is with AI. And that if you do use it, or if you explore it, or if you see some of the work it generates, there is a often hard to define and to express in words, but there is a way that you can tell that this is not being generated by another human. I know we can get into the Turing test, etc. here. But it's in the uncanny valley at the moment. And that's a good thing, because that shows often it is the empathy and its inability to be wise and creative are the things that show it for being an AI and not quite being human. So we need to hold on to those things. We need to be aware of those things, because that is our flawed, and our ability to look for workarounds and our ability to find shortcuts and make connections that aren't obvious, and find our way through these issues. That's your humanity there. And the more we try to get rid of it through filters, through projecting this image of perfection, the more we're feeding in to the AI sense of being, or how the AI perceives the world. And we're aiding and abetting the enemy, if you want to put it that way. Even though we don't see it as an enemy, we're not going to be in the rubble like John Connor, as far as I hope. Do come back to me where we're sharing some last tin of soup in the basement of some building and civilization has collapsed. It's not going to happen like that. But so I wanted to, again, just my thoughts about AI. There's a worry there for what it can do, but there's a worry there for how much you can do to alleviate, which is keeping on to how much of a human you are, and just being wary every time you feed into it with glossing your life and showing yourself in a form of perfection which is not true. So we're going to end up, and this is what philosophers have been saying for across the spectrum and across the world for at least 2,500 years. It's becoming even more so. You're going to have to be true to yourself. You're going to have to give a more accurate, albeit flawed, version, and be not necessarily proud of that, but don't shirk from it. Don't feel that just because everybody else is showing you a high gloss of their food or their amazing life that they're leading, etc. That's not how reality is. And the sooner we break away from that and start accepting each other for being the flawed individuals that we really are, well, the better chance we've got about taming AI or using it for our purposes and not just abandoning everything to them. Is this a message of hope? I hope it's a hopeful message. Look, as long as we can keep laughing and as long as we stick together, whatever comes through those gates, we've got a better chance if we stick together. I should use that in the film, shouldn't I? Have a nice day.